Welcome to Redefining Engagement. I'm Francesca Dumar, Director of Audience Development and Strategy at Contribui. And in this show, I speak to leaders and innovators in the media industry so that we can bring tips, wisdom, ideas, and even some things to avoid so that we can all do more engagement better. So without further ado, let's move on to our next guest. Hi, Patty. Thank you so much for giving me some time today. As you know, I've been doing some research around engagement and what that means in our industry and for different people. And you have some amazing experience, and I'm really grateful that you're open to having this chat with us today. Just to start off, would you mind just making a little intro to yourself? What do you do, please?
Thank you. It's great to be here. My name is Patty Michalski. I currently work with Hearst newspapers in the United States. I'm an SVP of content, but my background is really coming up through newsrooms and working with newsrooms and online newsrooms and developing, digital strategies and, digital content and audience growth and all of that kind of thing. So I'm super passionate about, connecting news and information with people in doing all of those kinds of things. So this is great. Yeah.
And tell me a little bit about Hearst. What kind of brands do you work with? What are your audiences?
Yeah, no, great question. So I work with the newspaper division, but Hearst has a magazine division. They have a television division. They've got some other media verticals, but I just work with newspapers. And so Hearst has a roughly about 25 dailies. They've got some big markets, and then they've got a host of weekly properties. So really just working with those newsrooms on what they need for digital growth, digital audience growth, digital storytelling needs, things like that. So we're really formally in the news and newspaper space.
And in your world, what does audience engagement mean to you?
Yeah, that's such a great question, right? Because I think how I would have answered that 10 years ago versus how I would have answered that 5 years ago versus how you answer it 2 years ago and versus now is really evolved, right? I think going way back, engagement was maybe more of a proxy for distribution and reach and how you're finding people and finding audiences and where you go on platforms. But I think, more and more engagement is, how you interact with news and brands and people and information. And is it a two-way conversation? And how do I get value out of, information or a brand or a publication that I'm following? So I think engagement has evolved over the years, right? I definitely see it as evolving. And I think what's becoming more and more important is really just building direct relationships with your readers, connecting with them directly, whether that's, via newsletter or doing events or just some sort of two-way communication channels where everybody has the chance to participate. Those become really valuable spaces. I find myself as a consumer gravitating towards those kinds of spaces. So it's interesting to see it evolve in that way.
And I think that's such a good response to that, because it has changed so much, and it will be so exciting to see what it looks like in 2 years, 3, 6. And in your experience, when you think of engagement, what aims does audience engagement strategy deliver on? What should news brands do more? Why should they be doing engagement?
Yeah, I think ultimately you want to build awareness, right? And sometimes awareness and audience, right? And so I think how people engage, a like or a reshare is a really good measure of, is somebody connected to this piece of content? Not only are they reading it, but does Francesca like it so much, she's going to share it with her audience, right? And the friends and followers that she has. I think that is a valuable measure. So anybody who takes an action, whether it's I think that's why commenting was so powerful back in the day, right? Because we gave people the opportunity to comment, leave a comment, talk back to fellow commentors, right? Whether that was on a website or on a social platform or engaging with somebody. So any of those types of participation can mean a lot of things. A share, a reshare, a comment, a watch, a view, a sign up. I am going to interact somehow and find myself in data, right, where I can personalize to my place. Giving value to your audience and being able to do that and somebody getting value, I think is extremely important because it means it's less fly by night, right? And you've got people sort of interested and invested.
So you're saying that on one side for the brands, it's about reach and awareness, and on the other side, it's about the users value what they're getting out, and then showing that, like you measuring the value based on their engagement and showing that they've reacted to that. Is that how you're seeing it?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Going back to that first part, it's not, it's reach and awareness, but it's, um, again, I think engagement with content can mean and somehow manifest itself in so many different ways, right? A like can be a vote and a positive vote, and I'd have kind of endorsed that by liking it or resharing it or leaving a comment. I think getting people to stop and take a minute and pause because content moves so quickly, right? On various platforms. I just think that's important. And so people feeling then and seeing themselves reflected in content or a conversation or being a part of something, I think it's just participatory. I come back to the word like participation, right? And like however you can participate, whether it's personalizing information, watching a video, participating in an event, all of those kinds of things I think are valuable for both a brand and the audience.
Absolutely love that word participation. That it really defines it. And what do you see as the hurdles in your experience? What is stopping news brands from engaging better?
It is focus and resources, right? Like it's focus, it's resources, and it's also probably trying to understand what it is you want to get out of it, right? I think sometimes we meaning the industry or places don't know your goal. You know it's important, but like what's the goal? What are we driving toward? And so I think that can sometimes lead to testing and murky results or murky understanding of what it takes to develop a program when you don't know what you're driving toward. So just trying to be really clear about what your outcome is super important because I think that helps align better with setting up around engagement.
I think you're totally speaking to the choir in for me at least. And could you tell me maybe what strategies have proven most effective in engaging your audiences in your experience?
What strategies? That's because again, that's evolved, right? It's evolved over the years and over time right now, right? I think as long as you've got people who are invested in the storytelling and watching, results in interaction, right? No matter how it happens, because some people are more comfortable doing some aspects of engagement, whether it's like, I'm going to write a newsletter and I'm just going to talk to my audience over here. Some people are much more open to, live video or being a part of an event, right? I think it's gotta match the skills and the interests of the person doing it, and then them finding value in however they can get out of it, right? So it's probably gonna be different for different people and different things in different situations. But I think because there are so many avenues for engagement, whether it's newsletter, responding on social, responding to comments, that kind of thing. Whatever somebody is interested in doing, just making sure they're wedded to the final outcome and watching and measuring how it goes.
That's quite a hard one to lead on though. Like as a leader in a newsroom, I can imagine you've got a team and you're kind of it's not like you can create a system that fits all.
No, you can't, which is kind of why you can't find a system that works for everybody. But if somebody has a passion for a place or a space, right? Like I remember, way back in the day, like having reporters who were much more comfortable, whipping out a phone, doing Instagram live, right? Just because they felt like that was the thing that's where they're going to like add value, right? Some people are just much more comfortable in comments, commenting, hosting a chat, right? Where you're taking written questions and you're writing written questions. Um, so it's difficult to say, everybody pick a place and try do it. I think it's more everybody's got to feel comfortable, but here is the outcome that we're driving toward, which is just
Mm.
more time and value with audiences measured by whatever your measure is, and holding attention and getting that person to sort of open up to you or your brand.
We're going down a route where every individual has to do it in their own way. But my question is really around like within that process, whichever process we're going down, at what point do we need to be considering that audience engagement? Like how can we make sure that that's taking shape in the right way?
Good question. I think, how do we make sure that it's working? I think is maybe another way of what you're trying to say. I think if you're a newsroom leader, ultimately you're probably going to measure a high level KPI that's probably different than somebody on a team or a reporter, right?
Mm.
So having KPIs that sort of are like bigger North Stars, which is maybe it's return visits, maybe it's subscribers, maybe it's time spent, maybe it's am I growing my newsletter list or something like that, right? So somebody who's sort of sitting up high saying, here's what's important to us, and giving people paths and avenues to layer up to that, just so we constantly have the North Star ambitious, here's our thing that we're about. If we can layer it up to that, that's great.
And could you share with me maybe a successful initiative that has significantly boosted engagement? And what do you think made it
Yeah,
a success?
yeah, no, right now, events, and sort of just virtual events, I think are going well, right? Because it is a different way of sharing information, right? It's not a written article or it's not a video, even though I think videos from reporters and people who have access to information are super important. But I think events feel a lot more, and conversations like that feel really intimate in a way
Mm.
that you feel a part of something where, yes, I'm a fan of a brand because I might read that publication every day or every week, great. There's just something a little bit different about a live atmosphere or a live conversation that makes it super compelling and inviting. And I find myself joining those, right? Or either joining those or watching those again, because it feels a little, there's a different type of an access shared or insights shared that feels different in a really good way, that feels more meaningful, because I feel like I kind of understand the topic better, or I understand the thread or the event in a slightly more nuanced way that I wasn't getting before.
It's almost as if it's quite authentic when it really does feel different. Um, so could you tell me maybe in what ways you might personalize your content to increase engagement among different audience segments?
Yeah, I think we are doing in like when you can see yourself in the content, right? When you
Mm.
can sort by city, by town, by high school, by location, right? And you really start to not look at information at a really high level, right? Where, yeah, you might read it and you might find out a little bit more about it, but if I can put in my address and see how something personally relates to me where I live, that feels really good, right? Like that feels really useful. It's more impactful when I can then look at the rest of the story and sort of understand, okay, and how I compare to the next town over or the next school over or something like that. I think that is ultimately being able to share information and display information in that way is really impactful for an audience, and I think that's meaningful.
It's so funny. I've literally just come off a call where we had exactly the same conversation. It was like, how can we take big data and humanize it and make it about the
Yeah.
person that is on the other side of that data and make them make them see the story behind it, make them feel like part of the
Yeah.
story by looking at, their version. I think it is such a powerful thing. And I guess part of us being able to do that is the technology that
Yeah.
we have in the background. Do you how and we're constantly talking about AI. It's something that comes up again and again. It's not new, but it feels like the conversation is definitely there. What role do you think technology like AI or even data analytics play in those audience engagement efforts?
Yeah, no, number one, I think, audience analytics and trying to understand different audience segments and how different segments of readers are using and in reading content differently is super important, right? Are you capturing a lot of one and dones? Like, what is your loyal audience coming back to? Sometimes, like, just it's more nuanced than looking at just big high level. Here's what people read yesterday, or here's how much time people spent yesterday. Well, let's dig in and try to guide that conversation more. I think taking a more nuanced look is super important. And yeah, with AI, I just think there's so much yet to be learned, but it's exciting to see some of the things that people are doing and using AI for those sort of internal workflow efficiencies. I'm I think we're only at the beginning of it. So how it's going to evolve is super fascinating, but just giving, if we can get the goal of anything like that is to get more granular. Because I think ultimately
Mm.
the audience is not a monolith, right? It is many pockets of different types of readers. So if we can use tools like AI or data programs that really help show, here's how your readership breaks down, it helps you understand those better. I think that's only really going to inform the work and the strategies all the more.
I guess that leads on so well to my next question, which is integrating feedback or interaction data into our audience and back into that content process. How are you doing it now, or how do you wish you were doing it differently, or is it something that you're still working on?
Yeah. Good question. I think I like balancing like quantitative and qualitative, right? Because I think it gives you a more holistic look at
Mm.
feedback. So surveys, yes, right? That we take a survey of a certain big subset of people and we get information off of it. That can really be informative. But surveys and doing the surveys, and can we have a couple of interviews with folks and can we learn a little bit more from a one-on-one conversation, right? Can we marry those two sets of data points with what our audience analytics data tell us, and what then stepping back on a bigger level does that mean? I think qualitative can be so impactful and help you understand the quantitative. So surveys, people, feedback, all of these things just sort of paint a picture of user behavior and what people want and what they're interested in. And I think just more of that is good.
Much more of that. And there are, I can name a load of pitfalls from my point of view, but when you look at engagement and engagement initiatives that either you've done or other companies have done, what would you say the most common pitfalls and challenges are?
I think further back, running a test and saying, all right, we did this, is over, and like going too quickly to it succeeded or it failed, and not stopping to do what did we learn?
Mm.
What did we learn? And then should that inform a next step, right? It's really the difference in approach between testing versus rapid iteration, right? And I think times rapid, consistent iteration, which does take focus and it takes time and dedication, right? Can help you get somewhere faster because you're stopping and you're taking that point to say, not just it worked, it didn't, binary or not, but like let's do this and adopt it everywhere. It's really trying to force a conversation around what did we learn?
Mm.
What are we learning? What else didn't we learn from this that we might need to learn more of? And just keeping it going. So a pitfall, maybe, I don't know if that's a long way of saying, creating a learning cycle versus just a boom, check the box, done, stop, succeed, fail, go on. I think those are just different approaches.
Do you have an example of how that's worked for you? Like one when you've done it and you wish you'd gone forward, or wish you'd created that cycle.
Yeah, it takes just everybody being on board with when you're working with teams of people, it's just forcing the rigor of, and it does feel like a lot like project management cycling, right? But it's important, I think, you to put structure around something. So I think structure is super important, and just saying, we're going to decide a cadence, we're going to stop. What did we learn? We launched a newsletter month in. What did we learn? We launched this new thing. What did we learn? What surprised us? What didn't? I think that sort of, rather than judging things too quickly, it's just, again, the learning cycle. Because I think where you sit in an organization might also inform what you've learned, which I think is really interesting, right? A newsroom might have learned something, but a product team might have learned something totally different. And it's like, you know what I mean? Like, okay, that's like bringing those things together is, can be eye-opening for how something gets shaped and grown.
It's interesting because one of the learnings sometimes in my experience has been like what that big picture ends up being. Sometimes the big aim ends up shifting and you go, oh, there's something
Shifting.
over here
Yeah.
completely.
Shifting and time. It's like, oh, okay, well, that didn't work out at all, but this kind of thing, it's like kind of cool over here. Yeah. Yeah. It
Yeah.
totally changes the process.
You have to be brave in a way to have those conversations. You have to have
Yeah.
your team have to be on the same page in terms of knowing that they can be brave to bring up the topics, to talk about it. Not there's a whole culture behind that is really fascinating. And
Yeah. The thing I will add to that is it's such a cultural, being able to do that is good, but we shouldn't do things the same way time
mm,
after time, year over, like the landscape is evolving, right? So like we should evolve. So it shouldn't just be it worked, move on. It's going to evolve every 6, 12 months. What we're doing now, we should probably revisit in 6 months, right? And check in on it. Are we still getting the results that we need? What in the landscape has come in that maybe disrupted it? And should we disrupt ourselves then again and try to do something differently? So
and a lot of that feedback that we're talking about, that disruption, actually happens from within our teams.
yeah.
We get negative, but there is not negative, but feedback from within our teams. How do you handle negative engagement or even feedback from your audience?
Well, I think we've got to listen to it, right? You know what I mean? If somebody is not engaging or reading something, that's a signal. And what do we think it means, right? Did it not get launched the right way? Also it should just make us ask questions of ourselves of what else could we have done? What else should we try? Maybe it's not over. Maybe it's not done. Maybe we should give it another go or another couple of tries before we really say, we've tried this now a couple of times and it's not working. So
Mm.
negative feedback, I think I'm here for all feedback, right? Negative, positive, neutral, whatever, just because I think it helps internally ask better questions to get to ultimately what the goal is, right? Like we should use that as, all right, this is what they think of it. Does that affect it? Sometimes it changes the decision, but sometimes it doesn't. But
Mm.
it's, talking about it again from all the points of view is good fodder for just making sure, are we doing what we should be doing here?
Do you respond to it as well? Like if you got negative feedback from your audience, is it something that you handle internally but also then externalize, or does most of the time when you think about experiences that you've had that you do it internally only?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, it depends on, I think, what the event is, right? Where
Mm.
has it risen to a level where, no, we should email people back, right? Or we should, there's enough conversation happening here where we've got to address it. Because some things are just feedback and it's internal, right? And like good information to know, but things definitely will probably, some things rise to a level where it's like, okay, we've made a significant change in the product and we should probably address that, right? Or we should get ahead of it, or we should talk to readers about why the change happened or why the event happened. So I think it's probably relative to what the issue is, but I don't know. It's never bad to talk with people, right? I don't know that's a bad thing.
I don't think so either. I'm looking into the future a bit. So we've talked a lot about, what you've done so far and your experience so far, but where do you see engagement and the future of engagement heading in the next five? I'm going to go crazy numbers, 5, 10 years even.
That is crazy. Yeah. No,
The
that is
big
crazy,
numbers.
right? Oh, wow. If ever a soothsayer, right? I think here, I mean, honestly, just given the changes that are happening with big platforms, tech levers, all the things that news organizations have had to work with and navigate over the past 10 years, I think shifting to that direct owned audience is going to require more engagement, right? And so thus it's going to require more energy, and maintaining that is going to be maintaining your readership is going to require more of that engagement and engagement cycle. I think especially as we see AI and chat GPTs, that are summarizing information at large, right? You know what I mean? There's something about participating in an event or hearing from a reporter or something that just can't be replaced by those elements. And I think those are important and valuable, right? Like we connect with people. That's what we do, like in the people behind brands. And yes, I'm gonna read this publication, but it's also a factor of probably following the columnist, following the reporter, understanding, what's driving a topic, and getting that is going to continue to be, I think, even more important, just given what's happening in the landscape.
I'm on the same page. I think we're going into a world where connection is going to be needed so much more, and that's the one thing that everyone's going to be looking for.
It
And
cuts through the noise, right? Like
it does.
there's so much content, and as a reader of quite a bit, I'm here for it, right? But again, the things that are memorable are those connections, right? Like
Yeah.
feeling connected to the topic or the author or like it's going to be super important.
And if you had to measure your engagement, the importance of your engagement strategy, from one being not that important to what we do, 10 being the highest level, where would you say it sits within your overall strategy?
I mean, it's up there, right? It's up there. We have subscription publications, right? So like that's important, right? Like it's important to reach people, to have that value, to have that relationship, to understand what keeps people coming back every day. That's important. Yeah, no, it's high.
I love that. What impact has increased audience engagement had on your organization's bottom line and brand loyalty?
Uh, well, you want those return visitors, right? And readers. Like that is important to the business, right? Like if we can have people coming back routinely and like building that habit, and, you know, more people coming back more often will ultimately benefit the business of what we need to do, right? Not only does it breed a lot of loyalty, like that's when you've got somebody hooked, right? When they come back because they find value in the whatever you got going that day, or like they're sticking with you through thick and thin, not just high points, right? That's good for the business. That's gonna continue to drive the business, which will continue then to feed the work, which is ultimately a good cycle.
And I guess just to put a last question in there, what would your engagement hack be? What would you kind of suggest that everyone should be doing in the industry?
More connection and conversation, right? However you want to make that happen. Connection and conversation, authenticity, because it comes back to feeling connected to the information or the author, and that just feels it's again, I'm going to go back to that phrase, cuts through the noise, right? It helps cut through the noise of a lot of it. Like, we get information from all sides all day long. I've got my TV on, I've got my phone, I'm reading news in the morning, noon, and night, in newsletters, and just conversation, cutting through making yourself distinct, and cutting through the noise and knowing what you're about.
Thank you so much. That was really insightful, and I loved your hack. I completely agree with it. It's about people, it's about linking everything together, it's about connection, and that's the only thing that we're going to be able to create. We need to create to cut through the noise. Thank you so much, Patty.
Thank you.